Cool.
If you can try and share video, go for it. If you can't, don't
We
worry.
are live. Um, Shows me that I'm sharing video. So,
Oh.
hello and welcome to our first ever Kuribrohs live. I am joined today by the lovely Thomas Rose.
Hello, good evening, everyone.
And today we are going to be talking about Kuribrohs stuff. So, we're going to start off. We have a week in review. So, this was a reasonably busy week for us. We released two videos. One was well timed, the other was somewhat unfortunate. So we first had Tom's 60 card Orcus list from last weekend's regionals. And then that was immediately followed by a Forbidden Unlimited list video.
Making the entire list that was posted the day before almost completely irrelevant. But
Yeah. um, so that was slightly unfortunate. But yeah, so we then had Dark Neostorm sneak peeks. Neither of us actually got a chance to go to any of those. However, Thomas, you did end up going to the Northern Irish Open, which was the
yeah,
largest ever event held in Northern Ireland.
yeah,
Um, how did that go for you?
it was a really good tournament. I was a bit worried about attendance at first because the event page that they posted up said that it was registration from 10 until 11. Um, and about 5 minutes to 11, there were not many people in the room. I think there must have been some mixed messages going on because registration was actually from 11 until 12. And in the end, there was about 100 players showed up, and it was a really good event. Yeah, we had a 7 round tournament. It all ran nice and smoothly, and I ended up going 601. Took a really unfortunate draw in a match that like I had no way of losing, but time rules are what they are. Um, but yeah, came through. Got myself a nice little Nintendo Switch and another trophy to go and live by my bed. It
That
was good fun.
is, you are building quite the trophy collection at this stage.
Yeah, yeah. At some point, I'll need to find somewhere like actually to put them, but for now, they can just sit there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's quite a nice addition. It's really great to see Irish events growing this way. It
Yeah,
is,
yeah,
of course,
absolutely.
unfortunate that the list you played is no longer relevant. I mean, obviously, we knew Dark Neostorm is going to be legal from next week. So,
Yeah,
legal from this Thursday, in fact.
and
Um,
I knew at the time, obviously at the event, we'd seen the new list that was going to be coming into effect actually today. So it was basically just like the last hurrah of summon sorceress and rank up magic for me.
you did a lot with those cards.
Yeah,
Do you
they've
think? Do you
they've
think they
served me well.
deserved the hit in the end, or
Uh, I think the writing was definitely on the wall for the rank up magic. It was just promoting unhealthy games. And then Summon Sorceress was going to have to go at some point. Could have gone now, could have gone in a list. But yeah, that's another card that it was going to go sometime. And Orcust might have been a bit silly with Dingirsu if it had stayed around for another format. So
yeah?
I'm not sad in as much as I'm now having to actually think about what deck to play rather than just continuing with the one that I know, which tends to be my strategy because learning new things takes time.
Sure. Um, I think we can just look at the Forbidden Unlimited list as a whole. So obviously, like you said, Orcus is changing massively because of this list. Like the
Yeah,
loss of Summon Sorceress, it was such a core identity card because it gave access to World Wand and gave access
yeah,
to the combo that we knew. Because I mean, again, we were pretty sure that something like As the Thought combo was going to be hit, not
yeah. They had to
necessarily
address that.
how. Yeah.
Yeah,
But Sork going, I mean, from my point of view, sort going does suggest that fiber might arrive soon in the TCG.
It
Um,
could do, or it could just be that Summon Sorceress itself was a really powerful combo
yeah,
card that keeps showing up in some ridiculous turn one boards. Either way, Summon Sorceress was going to have to go at some point.
yeah, for sure. And you kind of had to toss up with, as you said, the strong turn one boards. Do you hit Summon Sorceress or do you hit Saryuja? Because those are kind of
Yeah.
two enablers for that. Summon Sorceress seems reasonable. Um,
I
we
also
also,
think Saryuja could have gone to one. Like, there's no need for that card to be at more than one.
yeah, for sure. The card is insanely strong.
Yeah.
Um, so, additionally, we see large changes. Sky Striker Ace Kagari going to one. What's your thoughts on that? I think you've only ever actually played one Kagari at any given moment.
Yeah. So Sky Striker obviously is a deck that we've seen for a very long time now. It's almost a full year that has been arguably the strongest deck in the game. At first, we saw it with Trickstars and then just pure Sky Striker dominating everything for most of the last year. I
Yeah,
think it's definitely the deck needed to be hit in some way. There were a lot of calls for restrictions to multi-role, some even to engage. I think hitting engage would have been a bit frustrating because in principle, I don't like hitting consistency cards. I would rather hit something on the power or the longevity, which is absolutely what they've done with Kagari.
yeah.
So just not being able to keep recurring the engage for me is a much better way of hitting the deck than making you less likely to find it in the first place.
It's kind of an indirect hit to engage, right? Because the Kagari pretty much always
Yeah,
wants to grab the engage.
yeah, absolutely. And limiting the number of times that engage can be resolved in a game is really good. Um,
It
argue,
shifts more power into multi-role.
yes,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
that's quite interesting because the recursion is so important. Um, so, I mean, obviously, we're expecting Striker to still be a deck, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think the striker is definitely still a deck. I think that it might perhaps open people more into looking at striker as a large engine in the same way that we saw with Trickstar Sky Striker when Dark Saviors was first released. So like a half deck rather than just the little Sky Striker splash that you see with Orcus decks.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, I honestly believe that there will still just be pure Sky Striker running about. It's not as good as it was, but if there's one thing that I've always found from previous lists is that when a deck is the best deck and it gets hit in a way that there could be some debate as to whether it's still a good deck, it's usually still a good deck.
Yeah. Like realistically, I think if you have Sky Striker and you're very comfortable with it, it's probably still the right deck to go into Nationals format, unless you're able to put in a lot of time on
I'd say that
something
it'll depend
specific.
on when your nationals is. We see, I think it's Spain and Netherlands both have very early national championships coming in this weekend.
Yes.
Um, but for people looking to play in France or the UK, you still have more than a month to get prepared. So there's no shortage of time if you want to completely shake things up. And we get the luxury of seeing the results from the other championships as they come in.
Yeah. So, like you said, um, particularly so Dutch nationals and Spanish nationals this year get the case of not only has the new set just come out and we've just had a list, so things have changed massively, but also access to the cards can be quite a
Yeah.
big factor for those events.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm not sure that there's too much that's going to be inaccessibly expensive. I think that probably the hardest to obtain card is going to be no material, but I'm not even sure how well that fits into the current meta right now.
yeah. No material is definitely something where it's going to take an event or two to really gauge what the power level of that
Yeah.
card is. And the power
Uh,
level is going to change every
yes,
time we
yeah.
get a new deck.
Yeah, it's a card that will sometimes be irrelevant and it will sometimes be the best card in the game.
Yeah. Kind of like Maxi, except Maxi is just always the best card in the game.
Maxi was free and still broken if you went first. No material doesn't pay for itself straight away. You have actually lost the card in your hand, and it only does anything going second.
Yeah. Um, are there any other cards on the Forbidden Unlimited list that have changed in this update that you have much to say about? I think super polymerization is something that spooks me to no
Yeah,
end. The
super polymerization going to is scary. There are quite a few cards that you would want to play in your extra deck if you're using super polymerization, and that kind of, in a roundabout way, restricts its usage more to decks that don't desperately need their extra deck space. Generally, those decks are often a little bit weaker. You could argue that with losing a couple of Kagaris, you could just fit your super polymerizations into Sky Striker, but then you have the interaction with Sky Strikers not wanting to be summoning things that aren't Sky Strikers. So
yeah,
I'm not sure that it fits in many places other than like your True Dracos, your Altergeists, and Subterrors. And they're not the strongest decks out there. It's fine.
it's quite interesting because like the difference between one super poly and two super polys is really massive when it comes to deck building. I think like you
Yeah.
go from it just being this kind of god draw top deck to something that you're going to see like 30% of games, maybe a bit more than that. Uh,
Um, I think it's a bit less than that for opening hand, so it depends how long the games are going. But the
yeah,
decks that are able to utilize it are typically the decks that play a little bit slower. You'll see more turns, so maybe they will see it 1 in 3 games.
yeah, which is a really big consideration, considering how well it interacts with things such as Solomon Great, where it can just clear a board
Yeah.
of negates, basically, and then we also see a lot of large go first decks, um, such as Pendulum.
Yep. And relying on dark monsters, it leaves open the option for is it the Predaplant fusion, 2 darks on field?
Yeah. There is Starving Venom
There's
Fusion, which is 2 darks on field, and then there's also Predaplant Dracophalia.
Dragostapelia.
Uh,
Dragostapelia is a fusion monster and a dark, I believe.
yes, yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Both of which are like really strong cards. So
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of good options for Super Poly, and I think the fact that a lot of the format revolves around dark cards is quite relevant as well, because it
Yeah.
means it can have quite generic coverage.
And it's
Um,
a lot easier to dedicate the extra deck spaces to it when you get to have 2 copies.
yeah. So we will be jumping into looking at some Dark Neostorm cards, but I think
Yeah.
first it might be interesting to talk a little bit about Order of the Spellcasters, the new structure deck.
Okay. Yeah.
So we saw at the PPG Tour event last weekend that the deck performed pretty well. There was at least one copy in the top four. And you know, we saw that once again, if you give Pendulum good cards, it will take those cards and it will build a board of negates.
Yeah. 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 It absolutely does that. I played against one of the new Pendulum deck at the event in Belfast, and yeah, it was a very scary deck to play against. I was lucky and I won the die roll, so I didn't have to play two games into a field full of negates, and I'm not sure I'd have won that match if I had to go second in game one. Uh, it really, really does put up a very pressuring board.
Yeah. And it like, we have the Orchest deck, which is this format is pretty much dead, but the Orchest deck that we've had since Dusseldorf
Yeah,
was a combo deck, and
yeah,
it was putting out a combo. But there's a massive difference between the combo of the Orchest deck and the combo that the Pendulum decks are putting out. Like the Orchest deck, you could play Kaijus or Pankratops, and that was sufficient to clear it. Whereas Pendulum, we're going to see a shift to possibly cards like Raw Sphere Mode and such.
yeah. They have monster negation, they have spell and trap negation, they have access to rank four toolbox. So three big hitters there being Abyss Dweller, Baguska, or Tornado Dragon, just shutting down another wave of options. I think the game that I played second against the new Pendulum deck, I had to start my turn one into a board of the Hieratic Link, Vortex Dragon, two of the new Endymion boss monster, a mythical beast, Jackal King, and an Abyss Dweller. So, like, I very nearly actually broke through it because I opened with a ridiculously good hand, but in the end there was just one more piece of interaction than I could deal with, and so it completely came cracking back over me on the backswing.
Yeah.
I tried actually playing that game out a little bit longer because I was able to force out the bounce from um, the hieratic link,
Mm-hmm.
leaving Amorphage Sloth on the other side of the field. Um, and at that point, I decided not to attack over it, thinking that I was probably less likely to just bleed out straight away if neither of us could summon from the extra deck. And then I got to seeing my next card, and yeah, wasn't really winning that game from there.
That's unfortunate. Um, yeah, so it's possible to break the board, but it's definitely quite a scary thing, particularly if you're not playing a combo deck as well. Like, at
Yeah.
least if you're playing something with a lot of extenders, such as Burning Abyss or Orchest,
Well,
then
the other option is looking to things that we've seen in the past for breaking ridiculous boards where you pair like a board wipe or a Gozen rivalry type floodgate with a solemn strike.
yes.
Uh, so if you flip up, there can be only one or rivalry of warlords. Follow that up with a solemn strike for the negation. They don't have a counter trap way necessarily of interrupting that unless they are playing the Zephyr build, in which case they do, and then you're really dead.
Sure. The Zephyr build, which will have a profile up, I think, later this week on the YouTube channel. But the Zephyr is very all in on what it's doing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
It
it's
commits
quite
even more to turn one.
polarizing. As you say, yeah, it's all about turn one. It puts up an even more unbreakable board turn one, and it has more resilience to things like sphere mode.
Yes.
Um, but it also has a lot more bricks if you lose that die roll and you're having to play second with all of these Defra cards that mostly are just there to set up a counter trap negation.
Mm-hmm. So we've kind of established like Pendulum is looking like it's probably going to be tier 1 or tier 1.5, somewhere in the upper echelons of the
Yeah,
format.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Clearly, a deck that people should be familiar with. There's roughly about 3 different variants that I've seen. There's the Zephyr variant, as you mentioned. There's the variant from the PPG tour, which was playing. It was playing the Amorphage cards,
Yep.
and it was also playing. Well, it was the more standard sort of build. It was playing Morphage. It was playing a very small Endymion package, and that was about it. And then there's the kind of like super committed to the spell counters builds, which are probably going to be the more budget oriented ones. They
Yeah.
focus more on the Mythical Beast package and stuff, but definitely people should look into all of those and be familiar with them if they're playing national
I think
events.
Pendulum's always quite an interesting strategy in that regard, in that if you build a Pendulum deck, you are almost exclusively locked into Pendulum cards. But we now have so many different groups of Pendulum cards that you can kind of mix and match as you please, so long as you have ways into your Electromite and good things to do once you get there. So
Yeah.
you can do whatever you want at that point. Like, most of these lists are going to have the Pendulum Magicians, the Harmonizing, and the Purple Poison. Everything's going to be playing the Servant of Endymion and at least one of the actual Endymion boss monster himself. But the flexibility that you have around that with all of the different packages that we've seen going into the Pendulum decks over the last few years is really quite large, and it's getting to the point where there's actually a lot more innovation in a Pendulum deck than we've seen in the past. Because previously it's been the case where if somebody was playing Pendulum Magicians, you'd instantly know 35 cards of their main deck because these were just the 35 cards that were the best. And now I think we're going to see a lot more deck building around it. And I think that's really interesting, just having those choices to make and being able to make some meta calls based on what you see.
Yeah. So we're going to shift now. We're going to look at the top 8 cards that we want to talk about from Dark Neostorm.
Okay.
This is not necessarily all of the cards that are going to be impactful, but these are ones that I think are relatively important to be familiar with for the coming format. So, first card, Nightmare Incarnation Italy. This is more an interesting card in terms of design.
Yes.
So, it interacts with the opponent having extra deck cards, it
Yeah.
interacts with them having links.
Yeah.
And the fact that it can clear a board of nightmares is quite interesting.
Yeah.
Like
So it's a card that we needed last summer.
yes, yeah. Mm.
Um, it's kind of nice in that now that it exists, it limits the extent to which we can be locked down into that kind of extra link format again, because as soon as that becomes a problem, people will start looking at Idly and just having an answer that really punishes that overextension into the huge board. Um, I don't know that it's hugely relevant to the format as we stand right now. I think the most interesting thing about it is the interactions with the new summoning of level 9 quick play spell, um, and the implications that that has of being just an easy access level 9 monster on the field.
Yeah. And level 9s are, of course, very scary because Tricking of All Calamities
Yeah,
is
yeah, it's
a really good card. Um, but I think Italy is definitely interesting, and as you said, she's a lot less relevant than she could have been. But realistically, again, it's one of those cards where it's good to be aware of it because at
yeah,
some point somebody's going to play it against you.
yeah.
Um,
It's a card that I want to make sure that I own 3 copies of at some point because they'll be cheaper on release than they will be at some point.
yeah, pretty much. Um, a card that's not going to be terribly cheap at release, Signet Mining. So
Yeah.
we saw Lady Debug go to 1 in the most recent list. and Cynet mining seems to be a very good replacement for Lady Debug.
It it sort of does a similar thing, but I'm not sure how good it is, if I'm honest. Um, it's it's just fine. Like
Yeah. It's a
your
very
opponent,
fair card.
it's a really fair card, and in some respects, I really like fair cards. But it it doesn't seem that remarkable. I think Lady Debug to one was a really like strange hit
Mm-hmm.
in that it wasn't even a card where the player base had a consensus as to how good it was. Like you'd see lists that weren't maxing out debug, or even some people just didn't play it at all. Um, Going things like Flame Buffalo instead, and more Salamangreat cards.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I don't know how important it is. I think that if the format shifts more to being pendulum based, Ghost Ogre becomes more popular. If Ghost Ogre gets more popular, Cynet mining looks really bad. Um, it's it's an okay card. Like it's uninspiring right now. I think that personally, I think the Salamangreat deck isn't that remarkable in any way. Like it's very good, but it's unremarkable. Um, Cynet mining is a card that I think could be much more interesting in the future if we see a Cyberse deck that does something, like rather than just doing a little bit very reliably.
Yeah, it has an extra little bit in that you can send things like Foxy and stuff with it to
Yeah,
grave, which in slow mirrors and against like Sky Striker you can get value. But
yeah, it's definitely not a bad card,
yeah,
but it doesn't excite me. Like
sure.
I've always been like a person that plays decks that I like to play, and like Sign Mining is a card that I want to own at some point if it's cheap, because I still have this belief in my mind that at some point I'm going to be able to like play the Cyberse fusion spell and like do Diplexa Chimera things and then get it back and make my Clock Dragon and just summon a big board full of negates. I don't know, but I want a deck
Someday.
that does something rather than just summon Sunlight Wolf, add back Gazelle, set trap card pass.
Reasonable deck, just doesn't do
Yeah,
anything.
it's a really good deck. It's just not for me.
Yeah. Speaking of cards that definitely are for you,
There's a
next card
few.
on the list, no material. No, we'll talk about Cherubini, Evan Angel of the Burning Abyss.
Yeah, it's a card that makes me really want to play Burning Abyss, but I don't know how good Burning Abyss is right now. I'll inevitably like throw something together and see if it works. It's exciting to the point where even though I'm like really going for world's points, I wanna do well in Europe. I'm still thinking like even if I can't make Burning Abyss work, I should probably take it to an event,
Mhm.
just to see how it goes. I am really excited to get my hands on a copy of this card. I want to play it. I don't even know what I want to summon yet. Like obviously you can go down the Rusty Bardiche route.
Yeah.
I was looking at the Predaplants as a little starter option. I think that there's some neat options that you have there with being able to search for um, instant fusion. So if you start on a Predaplant, discard a monster, get your second one, search the instant fusion, make Cherubini, send the graph, get the seer, and then you've got instant fusion for level 4, so you can actually make Dante and do like proper BA stuff
Yeah.
underneath your Cherubini rather than just using as like the bare minimum engine, which
I
I'm
mean,
kind of worried is going to be the better application for the card. I don't know that this is a great format for BA, particularly with the possibility of running into Mystical Mine. Like all of the lists that I've considered for Burning Abyss under like this new May format. It's just like, but what if I play against Mystical Mind? Guess I lose then.
Yeah.
It's not a position that I really want to find myself in, but it's also a really weird like rock paper scissors dynamic where you could either build your deck to hedge against that potential opposition, or you could build a really big and exciting deck that is what I want to do, and you'll probably beat the people that have hedged for Mystic Mine, but you'll just scoop instantly if you get paired up against it.
Mm-hmm. It's the constant struggle, right? It's do you
Yeah,
want to play control or do you want to play wombo combo and just hope that they aren't playing negate everything?
like I've always been kind of a fan of being a little bit brave in the deck building and accepting that some matchups are unwinnable. I would rather have good matchups and one that's unwinnable than try to be able to beat everything and just sort of have to struggle through every game. And like in the long run, you probably lose more matches to having a weaker deck than you would to just accepting that something is going to beat you.
Yeah. Um, you've mentioned it a bunch. It's definitely going to be an impactful card. Mystic Mine. What's your thoughts?
Yeah.
Is it the new
Uh,
chain burn? Are we all going to cry? like,
it's a really divisive card online. Um, and weirdly, I've seen so many people uh, just touting the existence of spell and trap removal as sort of like a reason to disregard the importance of this card. Um,
I mean, normal summon
which
monsters are a thing. You don't need to care about Max C, right?
his Mystical Mine seems like a very silly card that I don't think we will keep in our game for too long. Like, I don't think there's necessarily something that needs to be emergency banned, but I don't think it's healthy for the meta game. In the same reason that if you ask players today, do you want Kaiser Coliseum back? They will say no because they don't want Kaiser Coliseum back. Mystical Mine is at least as good as Kaiser Coliseum, probably better.
I
And
mean, it comes down to the idea of what is a symmetrical effect, right? And
yeah,
so you have
uh,
mine designed as a symmetrical effect, but it's not really.
yeah, no, not in the slightest. And even if Kaiser Colosseum had the symmetrical text on it, it wouldn't be a symmetrical card because the deck playing it was designed to play it,
Yeah.
and the other deck probably wasn't. Like if you get into a matchup where both people have Kaiser Colosseum in their deck, they're probably both taking it out anyway because it doesn't do anything.
Yes, it would be a little bit silly. Um, yeah, mine's going to be really impactful. It's possibly going to see play in decks like Sky Striker,
Yep.
and then
Uh, I'm quite excited for seeing the real decks that choose to play Mystical Mine because it's quite an interesting card.
yeah,
Um, I'm not super excited to see the decks that are designed around Mystical Mine. Um, to that end, I think that it might be quite interesting to see what would happen if we had a format where it was put to one. Um, and in general, I'm not the biggest fan of like cards being anywhere other than 0 or 3.
sure.
But the reliability of being able to find one copy of it creates like an interesting game dynamic where you can be like protect the mine, um, and that's kind of fun. I think that it's a much more balanced card if there isn't always just like another one that's going to replace it if you're able to out the first copy.
Yeah, considering there's so many ways to search the card, like there's so much redundancy where like you pop it and they just go, "Oh, metaverse, it's back in
Yeah.
play." Um, do you think that the card is worse than Azathoth?
Um,
Like, do you think it is a more kind of impactful card on a format and changes how you have to deck build.
Yes. I think that it is more impactful than Azathoth. The thing that made Azathoth so good was that you could play a deck that in every other regard was a powerful functional deck and have Azathoth in that deck. But the effect of Mystical Mine is much stronger than the effect of Azathoth. Like, Azathoth bought you one turn, Mystical Mine buys you until your opponent finds an out that you can't Dark Bribe.
Yeah. There's a player in the chat who mentioned the idea of perhaps semi-limiting set rotation in order to deal with Mystic Mine.
I kind of like the idea of that. I've even considered set rotation for my own deck building for this format, even just as a one-of, not because I particularly want to play it, but because it gives me a win condition against the Mystic Mine deck. Like,
yeah.
if I'm playing against a deck that is the dedicated Mystic Mine deck that absolutely relies on it, you just set 2 field spells and don't use yours and you win.
Yeah. As people were discussing also in the chat, people were asking, why is mine worse than multiple negate boards? So what's the difference between playing into 4 negates versus playing into a Mystical Mine? Is there a difference?
Extenders beats 4 negates.
Sure. And that's kind of the thing, right? It's Mystical Mine says you can't do anything, whereas 4 negates says I can choose to not make you do.
And there are multiple ways that you can play through 4 negates. You can set a load of trap cards and try and crack it, like I was saying before, by having a removal and a counter trap. And the decks that are putting up 4 negates don't put up 4 negates again the next turn for the most part. You could sphere mode it, and you've spent 1 card in undoing all of that work. The decks that are solely relying on Mystical Mine, you have to have a piece of removal that doesn't get negated, and then they're just going to put up another mine. Like, 1 sphere mode is almost always enough. 1 MST is almost never enough to beat Mystical Mine. Like, I've seen some of the games that get played with this card, and like, people can draw like 2 copies of Twin Twisters, and like, if you draw 2 copies of Twin Twisters against a back row reliant strategy, you've won that game. But the pure mine decks go so hard on protecting and recurring the field spell that 2 Twin Twisters isn't enough to beat the deck. And at that point, like, you're having to rely on hard drawing removal in multiples, and these cards aren't searchable. You can't search for them because most of the searching effects in the game right now rely on monster effects. Like,
I think
toolbox removal.
You get into a point there, which is like the spell and trap removal of the format isn't archetype based. Like, the only deck which has archetype based spell and trap removal that can even be activated while mine is up is Sky Striker, and that can't target face up spells and traps. So
you have to put a monster on the field to activate an Afterburners just to have a chance of destroying the mine. And like, the decks that are just playing mine have no shortage of ways of preventing Afterburners.
Yeah, and there's no elegant ways of making mine pop itself either. Like, there aren't decks that can just set up a monster and then clear that monster to bait the opponent into having played the mine. And even then, like, you're so behind on tempo that you're going to lose to the control deck.
Yeah,
because the mine is basically always the control deck in the matchups it's playing.
Oh, absolutely. And then the weird thing comes in is that if you are playing the Mystical Mine deck yourself and you get paired up against an opponent that is like thoroughly prepared for it, more so than they should be, I'd argue, the Mind Deck has just lost. Like
Yeah.
it's either an almost guaranteed win or a certain loss. And it puts the deck in a really weird position where if the player base as a whole respects that field spell, then the field spell doesn't exist. And then they shouldn't be playing all of those cards to beat it. And then it gets good again. And you get a sort of a cycle where you need to be aware of and ahead of the trend so that you can tell whether it's going to be a weekend where people are ready for it, because it will make a big difference to how the sort of cheese burn decks perform.
Yeah. I think we've possibly mined enough from this discussion point. So let's talk about slightly more exciting, flashy cards, which is we're going to talk about two at the same time because they're related. We have Orcust Crescendo, and then we have Din Girsu, the Orcust of the Evening Star.
Yes.
So
I like cards.
I'm just going to let you take us away. What are your thoughts on these cards? What are you kind of like scheming in your head around these?
Crescendo feels better than it should be. Like, I don't know why it banishes, and I don't know why it has a grave effect as well. Obviously, it's only a card that works well going first, and the typical setup that you want to go for with the Orcus deck relies on having the field spell. So you sort of have to choose with your one Galatea activation on turn one. Do you go for the field spell or do you go for the counter trap? Generally, the perceived standard approach is that you go for the field spell and you end with Dingirsu and Symbol Engrave with Bardiche on the field, and then you've got a couple of Fog Blades available to you. So when you pass to your opponent's turn, you have symbols for Dingirsu Engrave to summon under your Bardiche. You get a Destruction from the Bardiche, you get a Send from the Dingirsu, or you can get the symbols back from Banished if you don't need those two removals. And having Crescendo there is a really nice card for if you get another Galatea opportunity on that turn. You can set it up for the Orcus player's second turn as protection for your push for game. So it's definitely a hugely powerful card. Dingirsu is the more interesting of the two as far as I'm concerned. I think anything where we get the kind of effect where it's a rank up for one material on top of a card that you're already playing is really strong, and like that will warp the meta just by having that ease of access. I worry with Orcust that at the moment they're a bit fragile to Twin Twisters and Called by the Grave. So you activate your symbols and Called by comes down, target the Dingirsu, you've lost your two removals and you've lost the opportunity to use the Dingirsu on summon effect to get back the symbols and keep that recursion going. Twin Twisters on the field spell and one of your Fog Blades has taken away like almost all of your interaction that you had set up for your opponent's turn.
Yeah.
The deck feels kind of fragile, and it doesn't have the instant win that we saw from Azathoth previously.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how it sits right now.
It also loses reliable access to the Time Thief engine, right? Because Redoer was really strong by himself.
Yeah, and now you need to find a way of accessing an extra level 4 monster just to have the privilege of trading in one of your Fog Blades for a Redoer, which, I mean, that's a very good trade. Like, a Redoer is definitely better than a Fog Blade, but it's not reliable. And like I've seen a load of big combo decks being posted around online. Particularly popular is the Diagram and Dinosaur deck with the Orcust engine. Really good going first through no interaction. But there's no shortage of decks that are really good going first through no interaction. Um, and I don't think that that is necessarily a route that I want to take with my deck building in a format where you could be staring down a big board of pendulum negates. Like a deck good going first through no interaction doesn't beat pendulum right now, and it doesn't beat Mystic Mine.
Do you think that we are going to be in a hand trap format or not? Because up until Salamangreat came out in this format, we hadn't really seen hand traps being played much, and then suddenly we started shifting, and that was quite a large change to the format.
Yeah.
And it informs deck building quite a lot, because obviously, like you said, you can build a great big board. Like the combo Thunder Dragon decks were really good when people weren't playing hand traps. But once you start playing lots of Veilers and lots of Ashes, um, it changes the format a lot. So, what is your thoughts on that?
I'm going to give a real cop-out answer here and say that in much the same way that you need to be ahead of the curve and seeing where back row removal and Mystic Mine is going to be placed week by week, you need to be looking at how the trends are progressing. The format to me looks like it's in a position to shape up in a way that you get sort of organic format progression even without set releases or Forbidden Unlimited lists. It feels like there are definite things that beat other things that will loop around each other. Like the most versatile, I think, is the Pendulum deck at the moment.
Right.
But as soon as people see Pendulum deck potentially being effective, reliable, and versatile and showing up on the regular, it becomes steadily more and more addressed in side decks or even in the main deck. And at that point, it could cease to be the go-to strategy because you'll see things like Ghost Ogre that really hurt on the Servant of Endymion. You'll see people looking more to Sphere mode to take out boards of negates. And yeah, I'm personally very excited for that kind of format because the recent formats that we've seen, whilst they've had development, it's been quite slow and linear development. Not linear in a bad way, but as in we've always been progressing on to the next thing rather than working in a sort of a loop where you need to work out how fast it's progressing around the cycle.
Yeah. So I mean it does look like we can potentially get into one of those circular formats. In
Yeah.
fact, when we were leading internationals last year, we almost got into one of those formats, with the exception that Goki had access to Top Logic Gumblar Dragon. I think without Gumblar, we would have had a similar format there, where you would have had Trickstar beating Sky Striker, Sky Striker beating Goki, if Goki could only end on a U-Link board. Um, could only end on a U-Link board. Nightmare Goblin is a very silly card.
Yeah,
Like,
that card should stay banned.
it only needs one of those effects, and it's amazing anyway.
Yep.
Um, so Orcust, you're feeling like the cards are really interesting, they're really strong, but it's possible that Orcust isn't the right combo deck to be on for this format. Would that be
Uh,
right?
it's a great combo deck to be on if you can ignore the things that it loses to and not get paired against them. So it'll have its weeks where it is definitely a great combo deck to be on, and it'll have weeks where there is too much stuff that it can't beat and you can't afford to play it.
Yeah.
And it feels like it is probably on the greedier end of the big decks. And generally, like the greedier deck will win until it gets floodgated to the point where it can't do anything. So you always want to do more until you can do nothing. And if there are too many people saying you can do nothing, then you suddenly want to do less, but have outs to the people that say you can do nothing.
Mm-hmm. So one of the chatters, Little Sheep, has asked if we can discuss Gate Blocker, and I think that's a card that we've both talked about.
Yeah, I think I mentioned that one in one of our chats a couple of days ago.
Yes, yeah,
Really cool card. Very, very neat in that it's one of a really small number of almost guaranteed outs to Mystic Mine. So similar effect to Spell Canceller. For people that don't know the card, it has a continuous effect on the field that all of field spells your opponent controls have their effect negated. And it also has a couple of other bits. Prevents counters from being placed by your opponent. Could have niche applications against spellcaster deck. I don't think
yeah.
that you'd ever play against that deck, though. And one other piece that I will assume is irrelevant because I've forgotten it.
Do you know what Gate Blocker is from? Do you know why this card was designed?
It's from Dragons of Legend. It's a secret rare. It's got 100 attack and 2000 defense, but I don't know why it was designed. No.
So it is from the 5Ds anime,
Okay.
and if you're familiar, so when they're on the bikes in 5Ds, there is a special field spell that gains counters to represent how fast they're going. And that's why Gate Blocker is designed that way. It's because Gate
Cool.
Blocker stopped people driving fast. And it
Okay.
just happens to be that that anime design could potentially have relevant applications in
Believable.
this format. But
I do find it really neat that it has two pieces of text that are super relevant to cards that came out like within a week of each other.
yeah,
Um, the
cards
thing
that
that I
will likely be played in the same format. I feel
Yep.
like with Gate Blocker, if I'm playing it in a deck, the most likely deck that I'll play it in though is either something like True Draco, where you can gain additional summons, because you could realistically summon it in the same way you would a Mano Awato, um, because um,
I'm going to interject here
mhm.
and say True Draco has a buy against Mystic Mind deck. Like it's
Yep,
the only deck in the format that just doesn't care.
but
Like
it can stop Endymion decks getting spell counters.
I, in theory, yes, but I don't think that you'd ever play Gate Blocker against spell counters.
It beats the
I
mirror
don't think
match.
it's good enough. I think that there are other cards that beat spell counters better than Gate Blocker to the point where you wouldn't play Gate Blocker for that matchup.
Yeah.
And I'm not even sure that you'd side it in, even if you had it sided for Mystic Mine.
Yeah.
And the biggest problem that I have with the card is that I don't think there's any reliable way of searching it. I could be wrong. It's a
Uh,
3 of that you might draw.
yeah.
I don't think that a 3 of that I might draw is an out that I'm particularly happy with in a matchup where my opponent will definitely have Mystic Mine. And if they have a Ring of Destruction or a Trap Trick, then suddenly I need to have two gate blockers to be able to win this. Like,
I mean,
it,
if you pendulum summon two gate blockers, they can't even target the gate blockers because of gate blockers' third effect.
okay. Oh yeah, that's the third bit. Other monsters or other cards you control can't be targeted.
They can't target other monsters you control with card effects.
Right. So double
People
gate.
have pointed out you can search with Block Dragon, but again, you're not playing Block
You
Dragon in
can't
this
search
format.
with Block Dragon because they have Mystic Mine active. You can't do anything with Block Dragon.
I mean, you can throw it into the air. So farewell, Block Dragon. Goodbye. Don't throw your cards in tournaments, kids. It's bad life advice.
I mean that is cute in as much as if you were to play a Burning Abyss Block Dragon deck, at least when you're going first, you could search out to the field spell so that you could then get back at them on the
Yeah.
following turns. So, like, I guess if I'm playing Burning Abyss at some point, it's a card that I'm definitely going to consider in that regard. Whether that's good enough or not, because it's not going to do anything when you're going second, not sure. But it's better than not being searchable at all, I guess.
Yeah. We will move on with the top 8 because we've been on it for like a half an hour, if not more. So the next thing to talk about is Ib the World Chalice Justicar.
Really cool card. This is a card that does something. You have to play a lot of garnets. Any deck that is relying around an Ib combo, like you already need to play bad cards to start it for the most part, because I think aside from Dinosaur, like all of your one card Denglong options kind of suck. So there's at least one garnet involved there if you're doing like Carboned and stuff, or Draconet. There's loads of ways in. There's really big combos if you can do it. It's absolutely at the top end of greedy. This deck like epitomizes if my combo goes off, I win. And it does. It will be a really fun deck to play because sometimes your combo will go off, and that will be awesome because like essentially if you resolve the summon of Ib, you can do anything. And those kind of cards are really interesting. They make formats fun. They suck against hand traps, but like they're cool. They do stuff. It's a card where I've sat down and thought, okay, if I get to this, what can I do? And the answer is lots. Like you can do all of your guard dragon stuff, you can do all of your Orcus stuff, you can do like just about anything if you play enough garnets.
Sure.
Don't think this is a format to play a lot of garnet. Still a card that I want to try out anyway, but
a lot of people compare it to Denlong. Do you think it will be as impactful in a format? Because Denlong was like quite a warping card, even though True King Dinos wasn't necessarily the like de facto best deck. Denlong was such a powerful card anytime it got summoned.
I feel like Danglong required less garnet. I don't remember the Danglong decks especially well.
Denlong, you would just True King and Diagram pop, and that got all of your monsters for Denlong to be made.
Yeah. I don't think it had so much requirement in deck building penalties. I don't think that it had so many restrictions with the rules of the format at the time. I don't think that there was a mystical mind deck, say, that says greedy decks will be punished. And so you could do combo stuff back then, and it was all right. So I think that Ib represents a much more high risk, high reward than Denglong did.
Yeah. Like it's such a massively different format. I think in the Denlong format there was maybe Ash Blossom, maybe Maxi as hand traps. Well, definitely Maxi.
I don't think there were still 3 Maxi at that point, though. I think we'd have been down at like 2 or 1.
Yeah, it was 1 Maxi, I'm pretty sure. Because that was the format that I was grinding with Zoo, and I was playing 1 Maxi. But you had a Dimension Barrier.
Yes.
Which was a very good card.
Yeah, card kind of faded out.
Speaking of Dimension Barrier, the last card we have to talk about is pretty similar. No material.
Oh. This card is mad. Like, Floodgate hand traps are always mad. And they have ridiculously powerful effects. I feel like there has been an attempt to make this one balanced to the point where it's not a card that you really want to main deck. Definitely not all the time anyway. If you end up in the format similar to this time last year, where we had like Goki doing silly things, like we would have loved to have no material then. Like it would have been the most important card in the game.
Yeah.
And at some point, the game will get back to a state like that where no material is the most important card in the game, and we have it. And that's going to be like really polarizing games because it's going to be like one of those formats where at the end of your round, you go back to your mates and you're like, had no material, couldn't win. And they'll be like, yeah, you can't win.
Sounds like the tale of Maxi.
Yep. Like Maxi, in some regards, wasn't even that polar. The thing that made Maxi horrendous is that it was still silly good when you go first as well. Like there were formats where if you saw Maxi and your opponent didn't, you win the game. Um, no material only does anything if you're going second. Like having to control no cards is a serious restriction. It's not really comparable to the same restriction on infinite impermanence, which can just be set and used as a trap card, like a breakthrough skill. Um, if if you're going first in game one, it is a dead card in your hand, and that's a significant thing. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's a real deck building consideration in a format like the current one, where things are really open. Like there are so many decks to be played, there are so many ways that you can build them, and not everything loses to no material right now. It's waiting for a format where everything loses to it, and I don't think that's right now. So I don't expect that it will see a huge amount of main deck play right off the bat. It will be one to watch as the format is progressing. Like
Yeah.
if it shifts to a point where this week's best deck does big combo things, then you might even want to be playing main deck no materials. But if it's not, then you probably want to side it if that.
Sure. Do you think so? The new Ghost Girl is gain life points each time your opponent
Yeah.
summons. Do you think from my point of view, it feels very similar to what no material tries to achieve? Do you think that those two compete for the same slot, or do you think there will be situations where they're played for different reasons, or do you think one is just definitively a better card than the other?
I think they are quite different. No material is the hard counter to go first, build a board of negates,
Mm-hmm.
um, and that combo strategy. The Ghost Sister is the
And
hard
Dogwood.
counter. Is yeah, Ghost Sister and Spooky Dogword is the hard counter to like your Kaiju Burning Abyss decks that we saw. Like Car had huge success in Utrecht, and then it popped up here and there after that. Um, and the likes of uh, Crusadia Guard Dragons, where they'll go second and they'll kill you. Like
Yeah.
any deck like that cannot beat. Like it is fundamentally impossible for that deck to beat a Ghost Sister and Spooky Dogwood because they have one big push, and their one big push would give their opponent 3,000 life points, so they don't die, and then they lose. Um, the thing that really worries me about Ghost Sister is the implications for formats where it is a good card for being a good card by itself and how that interacts with the current end of match procedure. So if you're siding it because it's good, and then you happen to be going into game three in time with, well, going into game three with like seconds or minutes on the clock,
Yeah.
you put in 3 copies of that, your opponent activates an effect to special summon, oops, discard, guess I win now. And that's really dumb. I think that's more fundamentally a problem with the current end of match procedure. Um, not going to go deep into that. Like, there's plenty of ways they could fix it, but they don't seem to care at the moment.
So,
But
quick
the
question. It is a year on, end of match procedure. As a player, do you think it was a good change?
no, it's awful.
Okay.
But we'll discuss that another time because that would fill a whole hour of content,
Yeah.
and
I
that's
think
not.
we will get round to actually doing a proper discussion on that soon, because it is such an impactful thing on the events.
Yeah,
Like, people have joked about the most recent policy change, about how it's impactful, but the end of match
the
procedure,
yeah the
like,
recent one has nothing on the effect that the end of match procedure had. So you need to guide us onto new conversation because I'm just going to get angry.
yeah. So that is pretty much all of the cards that we wanted to talk about from Dark Neostorm.
Yep.
Um, so we're going to move on to questions and answers. So if people have any questions in the chat, I don't think you're able to see the chat, Tom. So I will be
No,
pulling
I
questions out and I will be asking them to you. So if you guys have questions for Tom, let him know. People have been asking. We have already spoken about Orcust and Burning Abyss in general, but if you have questions about specific things, let us know and we will discuss them. Somebody was asking, Ludwig was asking, will these be uploaded to the channel? I will try and upload them. This is our first live stream, so stuff could go wrong and it could disappear into the ether. But hopefully it will be uploaded. Um, so the first question is Alan asks, what's your thoughts on playing Curse Seal of Forbidden Spell versus Mystic Mine? I think we can expand this also to Spell Vanishing because it's a similar card. Um, what's your thoughts on playing those sort of cards?
I don't know the text of spell vanishing. Um, it might be more effective. My concern with Cursed Seal is that it would only work on the activation from hand of the Mystical Mine. And most of the time, the Mystical Mine player isn't going to be playing copies from their hand. They are primarily relying on Demise of the Land or Metaverse, which activate the card from deck during the resolution of that chain, and you just don't get the opportunity to activate your Cursed Seal. So it's an interesting idea. Um, it might hold some water when playing first with a deck that builds up an already formidable board, forcing your opponent to activate a mine straight away. But um, from my understanding, the deck lists that I've seen of the Mystical Mine deck are only playing the three copies of the field spell itself to hard draw. They don't go in for terraforming because it is recognized that it's better for them to activate it directly from deck than try and play it from hand, and it also makes it more resilient to things like a tornado dragon or a spell and trap negation that would destroy that copy of Mystical Mine before it can resolve. So
Yeah.
it's much better to have your metaverse negated or your demise of the land negated because that hasn't cost you the resource in deck that is effectively the three lives of your field spell.
Mm-hmm.
And any monster removal field spell can't be then applied to one of those three copies.
Yep, I think that's reasonable. I think the big issue with Gear Seal is just it's a trap card, and like if your opponent's already resolved stuff, then
Is
it's
the other
unfortunate.
card that you mentioned?
Spell
Uh,
Vanishing is a counter trap card, and it pulls all of the copies out of the deck. It
what's the
is
activation condition?
it's discard two spell cards, I think, or discard two cards. It's got Breaker the Magical Warrior on the artwork, if that
Is it a
informs you
trap
to the
card?
card. Yeah, it's a counter trap.
And what's the activation condition for it?
Let me check. Spell Vanishing. I'm pretty sure it's functionally worse. Discard two cards from your hand, negate the activation of a spell card, and just let it load. Negate the activation of a spell card and destroy it. Also look at your opponent's hand and deck, and if you find any spell cards with the same name as the destroyed card, send them all to the graveyard. Let
Okay.
you look at your opponent's hand and deck. That's
Um, so the problem again there is that it relies on your opponent physically activating a copy of the field spell from their hand, falls into the same trap where it's unlikely to meet its requirements very reliably. I don't think that's very good.
Next question. What's your thoughts on Twin Twisters in Orcust versus Mind decks, both Striker and the Burn variant?
Against Sky Striker, really good. And Twin Twisters might have even reached the point where it's just a good enough card across the board that you can afford to main deck it. If it does, then we might find that it's actually all right. But I worry that against the pure Mystical Mind deck, like having a chance of drawing a Twin Twister isn't enough. Like they can play lots of negation. You're going to need more than one Twin Twister to win that matchup, and it's not a searchable card.
Yeah. Next question. Little Sheep asks, what's your thoughts on Shadow Fusion for Winda in Orcust?
Shadow Fusion is a card that I really like. And it's a card that I want to be very good. I recall that I brought this up when I was talking to friends recently, and I was like, Shadow Fusion, that seems great right now. And then they reeled off a selection of reasons why it wasn't as good as I thought it was, and I was like, huh, that's not as good as I thought it was, is it?
Yeah. I think Shadow Fusion suffers a lot when Ash Blossom is a card, because, like, just fundamentally that card hits Shadow Fusion so heavily, because you're pretty much always going to start with Shadow Fusion to kind of establish whatever you're going into.
But even as a card to bait out an Ash Blossom, it seems quite good. And now I can't remember off the top of my head the reasons that I know there were good reasons why it was like, yeah, it doesn't actually line up perfectly.
It's the reason that Fairy Tale Snow is banned.
I mean, Fairy Tale Snow would make Shadow Fusion significantly better. But yeah, I think it was a matter of what are the decks that you're bringing in Shadow Fusion against. You could bring it in against Pendulum deck, and the Winda gets bounced by their Hieratic Link, or just gets the Shadow Fusion gets negated by Endymion. You could bring it in against Salamangreat.
It feels like the card often, if you're going second with it, I feel like it feels that the card is pretty much always just going to be baiting a negate.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate.
I don't have a problem with that.
But you're playing cards specifically for this, because you're playing at least a Shadow card, which you wouldn't play otherwise.
Yeah.
I mean, like, you could, like, be playing Dragon or something in Burning Abyss anyway because you want to send it off Beatrice, but realistically you're playing Garnets with this card, and if that card is majority of the time getting negated, then maybe you can play something that is going to be negated majority of the time that doesn't add those extra slots to your deck.
Yeah. And requiring extra deck space is definitely a real consideration as well. Like, just the Winda isn't too bad, but if you want to have the Winda and the Construct, then you might be limiting your options a little bit. It's generally combo decks that you'd want to be including Shadow Fusion in, because they're the ones that get value of being able to send dark monsters to the grave, and those same combo decks typically want their extra deck space, particularly if we're going to start seeing things like potentially super polymerization in mains or side decks. Like, extra deck space is coming at a premium.
Yeah, every deck slot is very valuable at the moment. Next question that we have is OK is asking, what's your thoughts on Dino Orcust, or just the dinosaur engine in general? Do you think it's going to be rejuvenated? Like, Miscellaneousaurus is a very impactful card.
Miscellaneousaurus is a card that I didn't understand why it was at 1. Maybe it was relevant at the time, but I don't think it has been relevant for a long time. I'm not sure that you'd even play multiple copies of it going forwards.
I mean,
Uh,
it summons monsters from deck, so
yeah,
it always gets you a tuner at worst, which is also how they got access to Denlong often.
yeah,
Um,
it's really good, and you definitely play one in any sort of dinosaur engine.
yeah,
But I'm not sure that you play more than one. Um, I think that the Dino Orcus deck doesn't do much until you start playing all of the diagrams and the baby dinosaurs. And at that point, it's very high roll. Like if everything goes off and you open with a diagram and a baby Ceratosaurus and nothing gets negated, like you've won. Like,
yeah.
great, you win that game. But there are a few steps that you have to go through to get to that point. Like you have 5 or 6 diagrams, you have up to like 6 baby dinosaurs, and that gives you reasonable odds. I guess you're like 50-50 on seeing a diagram, you're about 50-50 on seeing one of the cards that you want to destroy with it.
Yeah.
Like
But
25% of the time it's going to happen, and then some of the time it's going to get negated.
but like Miscellaneousaurus is a card that allows you to have permissions so that you can resolve your dinosaur effects. So like it does presumably improve their matchup
Yeah,
with
it
those things.
it might help a bit, but it doesn't do anything against Ghost Ogre on the diagram.
Yeah, that's true. Um, it's definitely an interesting engine, the
Yeah,
dinos.
absolutely.
The next question we're going to go on, a lot of people are asking, is Sky Striker still good? Should I get rid of the deck? What's
Sky
your
Striker's
general feel
good.
on it? Striker's
Sky
still good.
Striker is still a good deck. Um, I don't know whether it is still the best deck. I think probably not. But if it hadn't been for the arrival of the new cards, I would have still rated it as one of, if not the best deck. So,
Yeah,
like, I think that Sky Strikers with one Kagari would still have been the top deck a week ago,
yeah.
but it might not be because of new releases.
But it's still very strong, and
Yeah,
we're going to see
it's
it played with Mystic Mine, so
yeah.
it's still a very relevant deck. There's a quick question, which is Black Ship of Corn still relevant without Summon Sorceress? No, no, that's not a card anymore. Um, the next question, do you think BA is going to be meta in the coming format?
We'll see how good my deck building is. I'd love for it to be. I know that Joshua Oosters is giving it all that online, saying that he's going to win nationals with it. I don't think he will, because I don't think BA is a deck that's capable of winning nationals right now. Like,
Mhm.
he's a good player. I think that he's probably making a mistake bringing that deck to nationals right now. Um, but I guess you don't always have to go to nationals being the guy that wants to win. Like you can have a lot of fun and not be there to win, which feels kind of alien because like I always want to win the event, but at the same time, I have definitely made decisions on deck building in the past that aren't to give me the best chance of winning the event. They are to make the event as fun as it can be. Like I've won events after making that decision as well, which is the best feeling.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I wish him all the best, uh, and I hope that it does well. If he does reasonably well with Burning Abyss, there's a good chance that I will pick up Burning Abyss and I will like try and do something even better.
Yeah.
Uh, because like I'm not one to be outdone. Like if the deck exists and is competent, then I will throw my hat in the ring and see if I can do a good job with it. But
But you're not sure if it is going to be there
yeah,
this format.
yeah, I'm
Uh,
not sure that it will work before the next list. Like it's a back burner thing where it's Burning Abyss, so of course it's going to be meta again at some point. But I don't know if I think that the release of Cherubini has come at a really bad time for Burning Abyss to have like a new lease of life because I
yeah.
don't think it stands up right now.
Cherubini seems like it might be more so the kind of new summon sorceress, where it's just this link climber.
Yeah.
Um,
And if we didn't get the new World Chalice Synchro in this set as well, then it would be like the go-to combo card. But I'm not even
yeah.
sure that it's the go-to combo card in this like meta vacuum.
Yeah. Something that a lot of people have been asking, what are your thoughts on Crackdown?
It's a really cool card. Um, I kind of like the design. Uh, I don't know if it's going to see much play. Like, there are so many big decks that do a lot right now,
Yeah.
and they include in them spell and trap negation, that it puts me in a point of thinking, like, okay, so why would I play Crackdown? I'd play it because I want to negate an effect, but my Crackdown's going to get negated by something else. I could have just played a Solemn Strike and it would resolve.
Mm-hmm.
And it would actually deal with the problem. Crackdown feels like a broken card in a slightly more balanced format, but I'm not sure that we're in that more balanced format.
Yeah. It seems like a great card for Cube,
Oh
which
yeah, 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 yeah.
is always a case of
That's
like,
straight into
if
you.
if a card is like good in a vacuum, it's good in Cube.
Hmm.
Which we will get around to eventually. There will be Cube content after Worlds this year. Um, we're a little busy until then. But so quick fire question: when do you think T Dragon will actually win a premier event?
It'll come second forever. No, genuinely, it it has had opportunities to win an event, but I don't think it got better with all the new stuff that's just come out. Like
It,
the hieratic link is naturally very good against Thunder Dragon. The pendulum deck that exists right now doesn't get hurt by Thunder Dragon as much as Thunder would want it to.
mhm.
Like, it's still a good deck. It's not the best deck. It will continue to be slightly better than fair, but not broken.
Okay, we are basically at our time limit for this evening. Thank you all very much for joining us. This coming weekend, I will be doing commentary for Dutch Nationals, so you guys can find me there. I'll be discussing with Ryan and JJ. So if there's anything you want to hear about that, please do let us know on Facebook or YouTube. Tom, you're going to be playing regionals. Whereabouts can people find you this weekend? Or are you playing
Am
regionals?
I?
Are
I
you?
don't know. Um, so there's one regional in the UK that's a long way away. Um, there's a regional in Dublin on Sunday that's
There is.
actually slightly cheaper for me to get to than the one in the UK.
Mhm.
Or there's a regional in Frankfurt that I think could actually be quite a big and exciting one, but I don't have a way of getting to Frankfurt very easily. So I guess if if I'm feeling super motivated and I can find some cheap or like entertaining travel, like if I could like find some people that want to go out to Frankfurt or like maybe fly somewhere and get a lift over with someone. If anyone in Frankfurt has like a floor or a sofa, it would become a lot more attractive because like I don't want to fly out there and fly back the same day. I don't think that's even possible.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, I don't know where I'll be this weekend at the moment is the short answer.
but hopefully somewhere fun. Yeah, if you guys enjoyed the stream, please do let us know. If this is something that you guys are interested in, we will try and make it something more regular. Might not always be the two of us, but we do have a good group of Kuribrohs that we can rotate through. So if you guys enjoyed, thank you again for joining us. If you're playing Spanish Nats or Dutch Nationals or any regionals, best of luck to you guys. And if you have any questions other than this, we will be answering YouTube comments as usual, and we will also be answering messages to the Facebook. So thank you all very much. This is Daniel and Tom, and have a good evening.
Bye bye.